join from Madagascar today. So this will be a little bit later, starting again at 1 p.m. Manila time. So this will give you some a bit of a leeway to have some lunch. And Rendra will join in his morning time at 1 p.m. Manila time to walk us through a briefing on Power BI and the basics of data visualization. Okay, and without further ado, unless there are any burning questions, we can get underway with the training. Let me press the recording button if everyone agrees, and I'll pass the floor to Wes.
Min, I am just connecting my phone and hearing myself echo, so just give me a second here to share my screen and we'll get started.
No problem.
All right, Min, I've muted my laptop to avoid any echo. Let me know if there's any issues. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead with it.
Yep, your audio seems fine.
Oh, you were very quiet. Okay, all should be good now. All right, so everybody should be able to see my screen now. I can see my own screen. And what I'm going to do now is go beyond, well, first off, go over what we did last time around in setting up a personal account and take it a few steps further so that we can set up an enumerator account. And essentially what we're going to do here is put in all of the automation that we had beforehand and then start restricting access so that if we have our data collectors, we will just send them this QR code for them to scan. It'll load all of these settings up that we're about to have. And in so doing, we will have them with a fully functional data collection app that is completely automated and also very restricted so that we essentially have a very bare bones app for them. They don't get to go into the server. They don't get to go into the username section. They don't get to change any of the automation configurations we put in and all of that. So what we're going to do, for those of you who are maybe going to be responsible for administering this to enumerators, please go ahead from here. If you have an enumerator account, as in separate from your project account, so you have two, maybe you have your administration login where you create your forms and manage the data and all the rest. And then you have an enumerator account that you use strictly for data collection and only share the necessary forms with that account. This is the one we're going to focus on now. So everybody can, of course, please follow along on your phones if you'd like to, if you want to set this up just for the sake of practice, but really keep this in mind for setting up your enumerators. Now, what you're seeing on my screen is probably not the same thing you're looking at anymore because I can add a brand new project, but I've wiped my app clean essentially. But there's a very quick and easy way if you're already logged in on ODK that you can add a new project. And to do that, you would simply click the K at the top right of the screen, and it will bring up a new window that says Add Project on the lower left corner. And so that's essentially what we're going to do. And for me, I'm going to edit. I'm not going to scan, or sorry, I'm going to manually enter rather than scan my QR code because I don't have one yet. And I'll put in my project details here. Now, this URL, let's see if I can get it to be full screen without doing that. This URL that we see here on the screen is the same one that we've used previously. So hopefully everybody remembers this. This is what you want to use for login. So I'll maybe hold here for a moment so that everybody just makes sure they have this the same way. You can always copy it from your previous username that you're logged in on. But just to make sure that everybody sees it one more time, I'll keep it on the screen for another 10 seconds or so. All right. So if you don't already have this, Min, I'm sure you can type it in the chat, or you can ask a colleague to remind you, or you can take a photo. But let's continue on. And what I'm very quickly going to do is actually unshare my screen so I can put in my username and password without it being recorded. So just give me a moment. Okay, so we're back. I have my username and password entered. And once you have this ready, you're simply going to go to the bottom right of the screen, which down here, and click Add. Now, in order to make sure that we've logged in correctly, as we've done before, let's click the Get Blank Form button on the front page just to see if it gives us an error or brings us through and shows us the forms that our account has currently. All right, well, I am in the fortunate position that I did not make a typo here, so I have all of the forms appearing to me that are on my account, meaning I was able to log in successfully. If you did not see the same thing when you log into the enumerator account, for example, if you get an error on this page, then you have to go back to the server, make sure your URL and password are correct, and the username, of course. So maybe just quickly to show you how we would do that, if you need to double check or fix an error, you would click this K, the top right, the same K that you would click, as I mentioned before, to add a new project. But instead of saying add project, you would say go to the settings. And from the settings here, we see everything as it is when you first log into an account. If you need to make any edits, you click server at the top, and now you can make these changes here. But all right, so let's get underway. Let's start putting the automation together as we did before. A little bit more quickly than last time, just to make sure that everybody is refreshed on it, but also not to drag this on, because I think most people should be remembering it. If I click form management, the first thing is the blank form update frequency. I'm sorry, blank form update mode, and I'm going to say exactly match server. Next is where I adjust the automatic download frequency. And it says every 15 minutes presently. Let's maybe change that. Let's change that to every hour. I think every 15 minutes is a bit excessive. So now we have it set to every hour, meaning 24 times a day. Our phone will check the server, check our account, see if there's any new forms or new updates there, and then automatically download them. We're also going to keep hide old versions, old form versions. We're going to keep that checkbox there. And we're going to scroll down to where it says auto send. Right now, it's turned off, but instead, For me, at least, I want it to be Wi-Fi or cellular. But again, keep in mind how your data collectors are going to be using this. Maybe you want it to be Wi-Fi only, or maybe you are topping off their credits and you want cellular to be an option as well. Just think about what works for your situation. Now from here, I want to make sure high-res video is not checked. So you see I have high-res video. I don't want that just because I think it will be very hard to transfer. I don't think we're going to be having any videos, but in the event that we are, it's probably best not to have high-resolution videos unless you absolutely need them, but that's something to really thoughtfully consider how valuable that is. Image size, we should be okay unless we start to notice that our images are coming in too large and they're causing data transfer problems. We can leave it. But otherwise, I think our automation is generally good. So I'm going to go back. And I'll actually go back to the beginning because now you'll notice get blank form is no longer here on the homepage because I have set my account up to automatically connect to the server and download the forms for me. So I don't need to go to get blank form. And actually, as a matter of fact, they should have already been downloaded. Yep, they're already on my phone already. So it happens automatically as soon as you connect to your account, or at least it did for me. So now what do we want to look at? Now let's click the K at the top. And it's very likely that you have two accounts showing up, at least two accounts, maybe even more. If you've added an enumerator account and your personal account or your data project manager account. But here's where you'd be able to cycle through them, essentially, to choose which account you're working in. For me, I only have the one, but let's say, for example, you have your enumerator account, the one we're putting together now, and your admin account. They will have completely different configurations based on how you set each of them up. So they could go to different servers, they could go to different, obviously, usernames and passwords, they could have different access control limitations on them, different levels of automation. They're essentially existing as completely isolated from one another. But for me, I only have one, which is the enumerator account that we're going to set up now. So let's go back to the settings. And now let's talk about how we can start to limit access. If we look down at the bottom here, there's a section that says protected. So we have form management, user and device, and then we have protected underneath it. And here we have set admin password, project management, and access control. So let's first and foremost set an admin password. This is going to be completely separate from any of our other passwords. So it's not that you wrote in your password you use to log into your account. We're actually creating a new password here specifically for this version of ODK, or this login of ODK. And why we want to do this is essentially to start putting in restrictions or protections of how the app functions. And so in order to, once we create an admin password, in order to make any changes down the line, we would have to know the admin password, if that makes sense. So for me, I'm going to put in something simple, just so I remember it. Also, my admin password is not very crucial because I'm not using this for real life data collection right now. But I caution everybody to please set an admin password that you will remember. Maybe even write it down, honestly, if it's hopefully different from any of your other passwords. Because there's no way to reset this. There's no way to say, I forgot my password and get it back. You'd essentially have to uninstall the app and reinstall it. And so it's just good to make sure you have a note of this. And I'm keeping mine simple. You just want to make it something that nobody else will guess, essentially. None of your enumerators will guess. So I do that. I'm going to say okay. And now my admin password is set. And I can prove this to you if I go back to the home page. I click the K. I click settings. Now look at this. Now under protected, it says unlock protected settings. This was not the case before, obviously, because it had those three options: set admin password, project management, and access control. So let me click unlock just to show you, prove a point. I type in my very simple admin password that I created, and now those protected settings are there. So this is just a proof that you can start restricting parts of the app via the admin password. So let's start taking this a step further. Let's click access control. And here we are confronted with the three sections that we can start limiting access. Main menu, which we won't really look at quite yet. User settings, or form entry settings. Let's go to user settings. Now, what you see here is a pretty big list. All of these items have a check next to them. They will mostly look familiar to you because we have actually seen a lot of these items throughout the settings that we're working in. When we go to, say, form management, we see a lot of these. Starting with what I think is very important to have on top, server. Let's uncheck that box. And everybody else can stay on this page. I'm just going to quickly show you what that does. So I've unchecked server. Then I go back to the home page to sort of reset those settings, come back in. And now I would have to enter my admin password again if I want to make any changes there. But if you notice on the top of my screen, server is no longer an option. I begin immediately with project display, and I don't have access to change the server. So let's think about this practically. This means I can't go in and change the server URL. I can't go in and even see, let alone change my username or password. So you can actually give this app to an enumerator, not tell them that they even have a username or password, because they're not going to get logged out and they're not going to be capable of logging back in. So they can just take this and run with it right away. It also means they don't need access to their enumerator account. They don't need to be able to have, to go in and start changing things in there, essentially. And we've seen this happen. That's why we're giving you this walkthrough right now to try to keep that from happening again. So restricting settings can be pretty powerful for protecting sensitive areas of your app configuration, but also for simplifying. Because a lot of these other settings, for example, you don't need enumerators to go in and start changing. Some of those are sensitive because they could mess up the flow of data. Others are just sort of unnecessarily there because our enumerators aren't going to go into the map section and change anything, so we'll start taking those away. So if I want to get back in to change I have to enter my admin password once more. You see already once I've admin password on top and the protected settings are showing. So I'll go back into access control. I will rejoin you with user settings. And I'm actually going to just start unchecking all of these boxes for the most part. Project display, theme, none of these are particularly necessary. Language, we should set beforehand, and I can show you how to do that. I'm assuming I would be, actually, I'm going to keep language on there because let's go and check for that after. I'm assuming that you can change to Tagalog. I'm not sure what other language may be there, what other local languages may be there, but I would be incredibly surprised if Tagalog is not. Text font size, there's so many of these that are there but not particularly necessary. So I'm going to start unselecting many of these. Splash screen, yes, none of this is necessary. Blank form update mode. Okay, once you see blank form update mode, I'll bring that to the top actually. Think about blank form update mode, because this is where we started going into the form management settings. So a lot of these will now look familiar to you. And I would really like to take most of those form management settings away. Because with these available to the enumerator, they can start undoing the automation that we have put in place, if that makes sense. So I'm going to take off basically all of these. Auto send, delete after send. No enumerator really needs to go in and change this. So let's really start to put in those restrictions here. High-res video, like I've already said, we want to take that permission away. Image size as well. Show guidance for questions. I think we can potentially let's take all of these out. Unless there's a setting here that you really think your enumerators need access to, we can always come back in and give it back. But for now, let's really restrict the app as much as possible and show you what that's going to look like once we do. So if I'm not mistaken, let me just double check. The only setting I have left here, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to remove language because we're already logged into the settings. So we can already change that for ourselves. So we have nothing from the user settings available. All of these boxes have been restricted. Now we can go back 2 pages and let's look at languages just to be. Actually, everybody can stay here for a moment. I wanted to show you what this looks like, what we've just done before we move on anywhere else. The homepage looks the same. The main menu, we didn't change anything there. We haven't yet, but we can. If I go back into my settings, now look at what options I have available to me. Everything is hidden essentially behind the admin password. So your enumerators, when they get this app, when they scan the QR code, they will have a fully automated app that's logged in with forms on it, ready to go, without the ability to make any changes to the settings. So I'm going to enter my admin password. Perfect. Now all my settings are back as we had them because I'm logged in via the admin password. So let me go to user interface. And let's just see when we're talking about language, am I in the wrong place? Oh, sorry, clicked maps unintentionally. No wonder, it was very confusing. Okay, so when I go to user interface, let's choose language. And by default, well, at the beginning it says default. Let's see. I mean, you can look for anything that makes sense to you, but I will look for, let's see. Perfect, it is there. So we can do it. I will not because I won't be able to get out of it. But if you want to change the app to Tagalog, you can, but be mindful of one very important thing when you look at language in the user interface. This is only going to change the language of the app. And actually, I say I'm not going to do it, but I may as well, just to prove a very quick point. This is not going to change the language of my actual forms. If I click, for example, you see, I have this selected now. Oh. And when I change the language, it brings me back to the main menu. And only you will be able to tell me if this makes any sense. Now I have to navigate myself back. And the funny thing that you find when you choose the language within the app is that certain sections are fully translated or not. But now, just to quickly prove a point, you can see that all of my forms themselves are still in English because I didn't change the language of my forms. I changed the language that the app itself presented in. So now if I go back to the settings, you can see some of this is still in English. I really wonder who actually does this translation, because it seems like it's never fully complete. But here we go. Now I just need to navigate myself back. Sorry about that. Okay. So that was just sort of to prove a point. Now let's look at maybe restricting a little bit more. So I'm going back in with my admin password. Everything is here. Let's go one final time to access control. And let's maybe change main menu settings. So for example, if we want our enumerators to be restricted from any of these, we can remove them. I personally think let's maybe say delete saved forms, but otherwise we don't really need to restrict the main menu settings, but this is more to prove a point. And when I go back to the main menu, you see that delete saved forms is no, or